Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. We have Ken Quiethawk to thank for that amazing intro, and you can find him and his wife at nativestorytellers.com. Very important that we remember how history was shared down through the ages, and Native Storytellers are one of those ways. And so I check them out. They are an amazing couple, and their website is a phenomenal website. Also, reminder, tomorrow night, Sunday, Monday night at 9 p.m., Michelle Avanti will be on the show. So have your birth date and everything ready and call in if you're so inclined. That said, Mark has a fabulous show here today, and I am so looking forward to this author. He's a phenomenal author, and the topic is one that is near and dear to my heart because, of course, it has metaphysical, paranormal material in it. So I'm as juiced as they can be. So welcome to the show, Mark. How are you doing?
Mark? I'm okay. Had a little...
Mark had a little something, not sure what.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had... it must have been a car hit a telephone pole up the street, and it's like all of a sudden lost connection right as the show started.
Typical.
Surprisingly, yeah. I'm back on the air. Had a little.
Did you
talk
ever think that ever since we did that show with I can't remember his name, but the talking mongoose demon, do you think maybe he gave Jeff to us and Jeff is now infiltrating into every show we do?
That could be a real possibility. I'm just waiting for this weasel kind of character to appear in the window or something like that and start yelling profanities at us. That's kind of the way the week has gone. But yeah, it's the ghost of Jeff.
Yes, the talking mongoose rides again.
Yeah, that's.
We're going to have to bring him back to the show to exercise it, I think.
Yeah, that's the way this week's gone. But we have really interesting show lined up, and we don't do a whole lot of paranormal ghost stories, but the ones we've done have been really good. We just in the last month we've worked in more of these topics, and I think they've been well received, and I think
Absolutely.
we have another leading name in paranormal research, joining us today. So, we have Western Kentucky's Stephen King joining us. Our guest is a former prison guard turned radio host and author, Steve Asher. Steve hosts the House of Asher radio show, and he just published Hauntings of the St. Vincent Academy. So, welcome, Steve. How are you doing?
Hey, present and accounted for, sir.
All
yeah,
right.
the West Kentucky Stephen King thing. Yeah, no pressure. Wow. I think I'd rather take my chances with the demon mongoose. Yeah, that's some big shoes to fill. Whatever, I joke with people and they'll kind of go, says, yeah, people would kind of sometimes joke and say, yeah, the West Kentucky Stephen King, and they're like, those are some big shoes. I said, well, you got to remember, I'm from Kentucky. We don't wear shoes. So sometimes.
But it's your latest book is similar to like Night Shift, a collection of stories. Your interviews with eyewitnesses of this building complex in Western Kentucky. And it's similar to, what Stephen King has done with some of his collections of stories, and I think you're covering a wide variety of hauntings, strange occurrences. You have these characters like you find in Pet Cemetery, these just small town people that have these little. I think you do a nice job of creating their like nuances, that you find in like an author who is observing people in a small town.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm bad with compliments other than saying thank you. I don't know what to say. But it's one of these things. I've been lucky enough to travel quite a bit, domestically and internationally, but it always kind of comes back to that kind of Mayberry, Norman Rockwell-esque thing of growing up in a small southern town, and you knew your neighbors, and you have like the little fair or whatever downtown, around the square, and they have cakewalks. I mean, don't get me wrong, everywhere has problems, but there's a certain vibe, both positive and negative, to a small town. And when I started writing, I just started writing about folklore and stories I heard growing up, and then also connecting with investigations that I did and places that I visited and whatnot, and it just sort of come together like that. It was I don't know. Sometimes when I was first writing, it almost come off like, because everyone's getting their legs, and I was like, okay, well, this sounds more like a Lovecraft story. This sounds more like a Poe story. This almost sounds like a oh my goodness, the Cat on the Hot Tin Roof guy. I'm blanking on his name. Tennessee Williams, where it was just so flowery, such a southern dripping syrup kind of thing. I had to pull it back because I was like, well, people from the South, that out of the South, will not probably care or get that. So I had to kind of get it cleaned up for mass consumption, and so far people seem pretty well with it. I mean, I do my absolute best to not convince anybody about ghosts or anything like that, because I don't know what's out there. I know I've encountered some things and had some experiences and talked to people that had experiences, but now if they say I felt I dealt with a nature spirit or something like that, or I dealt with maybe somebody had a really negative experience and said they felt it was a negative entity, or maybe they even used the term demon, I will use their term. I'm not there to judge it. It's very, just a fact. This is what they felt they saw. This is what maybe my opinion is, because sometimes people's like, well, I thought it was this and that. Traditionally, like, there's certain things, poltergeist activity has sort of a marked level of events, things like that. So, I'll look at what I have learned and what they report, and then kind of pull together a general consensus. But so far, the responses have been positive.
Okay. Yeah, you've gotten a lot of traction out of this book so far. You had a really nice discussion with Richard Sirrett a week or so ago, and you two really delved into the book, and I was impressed. It was a thought-provoking talk about so many different aspects of the paranormal.
Well, I was just going to say, Rich, I have a tendency of, okay, you're talking about Stephen King movies and books. Mm-hmm. Richie Tozer, calls Eddy Spaghetti, and mm-hmm. I'm that guy. I have that vibe. If your name is Richard, I'll probably call you Rich, or whatever. It's just my name. I shorten everything, and I talk to everybody like they're my best friend. I think it's part of that's, believe it or not, from working in the penitentiary system. You can go into there flexed out on somebody with an authority kind of complex, or you can kind of go, hey man, let's talk this out. Let's keep the sergeants off our back and the captains off their backs, and we're all going to have a good night. And you kind of endear yourself to people by coming in there kind of humble and friendly. Also, I probably could have been a good car salesman, but here we are. But Richard, much like you guys, you don't really push it with a hard agenda. Sometimes it's hard for me to navigate, especially if I'm not aware of it before the interview. And y'all just let it kind of grow naturally. And for me, that's the best way to do an interview anyway.
Okay. Just talking with you, just like one of those, it usually is an organic conversation. So you start off with in your new book, there's multiple layers of buildings on this property, but as we get started analyzing the variety of paranormal activity associated with the building, let's go back to the purchase of the property, the first building on the site, the different ownership, with the St. Vincent Academy, and obviously there's some kind of church related foundations there. Steve, can you tell us a little bit about the property? And you get a crossroads in the area, the sister church St. Anne's down the street.
Sure.
So let's just have a general view of where you set this book.
Right. Well, what you have to understand is the Hauntings of the St. Vincent Academy really encompasses all the, like you said, a myriad of different buildings, which actually kind of extend throughout the town of Morganfield and a little bit beyond. This is in Union County, Kentucky. That is just a little north of where I am in Caldwell. And it's a very woodsy area, and it was actually established in the town of Morganfield in 1812. And this was a very small, obviously, farm-based thing. I think it may have been maybe 3,000 people. And, and it really hasn't grown a whole lot since. Now, the academy was first started, it actually was formed in Morganfield around about 1820. There was a group of nuns, the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, that oversaw the school. And they traveled probably 150, 175 miles to set this up. And, slowly, they became sort of the linchpin for the building blocks for the community, because that's just sort of one of those things you do. Especially the early church, they would go out and set up churches and different sort of ways, for the children to have ways of being educated and learn trades and things like that. And that's kind of what happened. They started out, like I said, again, with the academy. And, of course, there was, St. Anne's, which was a good-sized church in the locale. And not to mention later the Higgins Learning Center, which was, I think, established in the late 60s or early 70s. I'm sorry. And that was, and that incarnation was more for special needs teens and adults. Before that, it had been everything from a kind of a home for wayward mothers, teen moms, and even housed children that were not wanted. Back in the old days, the names of stuff like that, like in Louisville, Kentucky, I think they had like the home for the unwanted and feeble-minded or something like that. It was the way it was said, was in the times. Obviously, we've changed since then, but it was just one of those things. It was an act of charity, and that's where it kind of started, and, there was a lot of different, like you said, a lot of homesteads, a lot of pig farmers and horse farmers and cattlemen and dairy farmers and all that. And slowly the community grew up around the church, just like a lot of small places. The church is the linchpin of it all. And it always stayed a steady influence and sort of beacon of hope for the people in the community.
It's just interesting how a noble idea somehow it got connected with all these different hauntings, like the cryptids in the area. We'll get to that.
Sure.
Are any the buildings still standing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I know St. Anne's is still there. This has been since 8 months ago. So God forbid if something happened, I don't want to get emails and people being mad. As far as I know, it's still there. The Higgins Learning Center, which is the place that we actually got to investigate, which we included a chapter in the book, it was converted into a auto shop. And I won't say the owner's names. I spoke to him a little bit privately and told him we investigated it before and talked a little bit that I was planning on trying to write something about it. They didn't want their names mentioned, but they did say kind of off record that they were still having activity, especially when they were doing a renovation. The wife wouldn't go there at night because of seeing shadows, which they can touch on, some stories about the nun here in a little bit. But
that was my next question, yeah.
Okay. Well, and the thing is, too, what you got to understand is even before, European settlers came here, most native peoples used Kentucky, especially in parts of western Kentucky, as hunting grounds. They didn't stay here a lot, and as I understand, they considered it kind of the spirits' land, and it was okay to come and hunt and go across, but you didn't really stay here for a really long time. That's why you have so many cultures out west and up north, and because they had everybody come through here, the Cree and from Canada and all that. So, but it was sort of a enchanted land, but enchanted doesn't always mean that it's magical. It also means it could be hazardous. If you look back in ancient cultures with fairies and stuff, they weren't always Tinkerbell. They were also mischievous and might steal your children and do all kinds of different things. So they gave it a wide berth. They respected it. They used it, but they usually stayed out. So, but as, again, white settlers come in, that's when it seems like they would stir up certain situations or draw the attention of supposed spirits or entities in the area.
Okay. So, and you just mentioned the example of some of the shadow people that have been reported, and that topic does feature into the Black Nun case. So let's take a look at that case study and see how that fits into the haunting, being one of the hauntings of the St. Vincent Academy. What happened there?
Sure. Well, again, back in the day, a lot of times these places were set up by nuns. They would generally have a priest or somebody who was an overseer or a bishop or somebody that would come and make sure, kind of bean counters, you got to have them to make sure, the proceeds are going to what they're supposed to, that they're following religious doctrine, and that they have what they need. There were times back then, obviously, it's not like you just call FedEx and you get a shipment. Winter times was really hard and arduous, and a lot of times these nuns really were on their own. It's not like they had a lot of guys there to split firewood for them, and you're trying to care for these people. And
it was a self-sufficient community.
Well, right. It was kind of its own little homesteads in a way, but with a religious slant on it. And this was doubly true during like times of fighting, like the Civil War, obviously, which ravaged this area, made it even worse so. And for the most part, people still were kind of going, well, let's try not to hit churches. Let's not try to hit this and that, unless they thought you were harboring the other side, and then all bets are off. But as of the Black Nun, the story that I got from, I'll make sure I get her name right. I don't want to say her actual name because I always change names for their protection. Tanya, I believe, is what I put in the book. And she was saying that there had been upper rooms that had like the old coal oil type heaters. And so anyway, this nun was trying to refill this in the middle of the night because it went out. They were doing a whole lot of stuff trying to, I don't know if they were trying to get snow off the roof or something so it didn't fall in. They just didn't do it during the day. Well, during the night it went off, and it was bitterly cold. So instead of waiting, an hour or something like that to let it cool down sufficiently, and I'm sure you've always heard, don't pour gas in a hot generator because it could flash on you and all that. Well, basically, unfortunately, this is what happened, and some of the coal oil got on the bottom of her outfit, the nun type outfit. Abbott, thank you. So anyway, it got on the lower part of it. So anyway, and it caught on fire, right? So she kind of jumps back. She spills more on the floor. What's in the thing tips over, burns her badly, very badly, and she ends up dying from the injuries. Well, thank God they were able to put the fire out and not have any more fatalities. But once they started really doing changes to the facility, updating it, adding the new heat ducts and whatnot, they started seeing a shadow of a nun. And I'm not talking like whatever that movie was, has like a white face, vampiric looking. Wasn't a demon, but it was just an outline, like a shadowy, smudgy looking figure of a shadow of a nun. A shadow nun, if you want to. Anyway, but the problem was this, anytime somebody would kind of notice it was there or get close, it would take off very quickly. Almost seemed like it was hovering, shoot down the stairs from the upper floors and disappear into the hallways. Well, that in itself is pretty freaky. But a time or two, some people chased after it. I guess they thought maybe somebody had broke in, maybe somebody was in the bottom floor when it come down, and they just thought it was somebody into the building, without permission. So they chase after it, thinking it's an intruder. Well, they end up not catching them, but within 6 months, they either have a very strange accident, or they come down sick with something and die within 6 months. So therein started the Curse of the Nun story. And I was actually explicitly told, I need to talk to you guys. I said, you're going to think I'm clowning with you, but if you see a figure come down these steps, do not engage it. Do not chase after it. So if you want to take a picture of it, that's fine. You want to say, ask a question. She said, but I doubt you'll be saying anything because it's going to shock you. They say, but do not chase it, because we have had a couple fatalities that, it's not said publicly, but we feel was linked to this entity, which I never quite understood because the nun was there to help. So I'm not sure how that was. Again, it's a story. Again, it's a reported incident, and I wrote it down as such. But luckily, we didn't see that. Now, we did capture images of what looked like people, specifically a little boy named Ryan, peering out from under medical carts, because by this time, this was a adult facility, and they would take med carts around and give them their medications and whatever. And we were having problems with our taking our photos. We were getting areas that were completely lit up, but you would see us just like a swipe of shadow going across it. It was just the darndest thing. And then we would have, like, you know, like the magnetic metal doors that have the magnetic locks at the top. You open them, they stay. Well, they would open, they would slam, ease back, click, and slam again. There's no wind. All the doors and windows are closed. There's only us in the building. We checked it for there's no people, there's no cats, there's nothing. We checked the doors out, looked for wiring, looked for any kind of tampering. There was nothing there. Well, that plus the imagery of a little boy in the hallway, plus we also got EVPs of a little kid saying, "I want to go home." That we had the sound of children sound like they're skipping up the hall, you know, like a kid's sort of hopscotching. We had that. We had, you know, voices of someone talking about the office because we were trying to figure out. There was one room that was a little bit nicer. You know, you can usually tell when, like, there's the commons area and then, like, say maybe the dean or the proctor or whoever's kind of running it. Usually the office is a little bit nicer. Maybe it's not mahogany, but the wooden side of it's nicer, you know, nice desk. And I remember speaking to Tanya, and I was like, I wonder whose this was, because a lot of the rooms had stickers and different little, you know, things like a kid or a special needs person may do, you know, put stickers on the wall or whatever. But it was nice, and I was like, well, whose area was this? And we had an EVP, which I really need to get you, and it sounded like somebody. I don't know if it was the person speaking for themselves or whoever, but it almost had a Irish brogue to their voice. And I'll do the best I can. And I said, well, who lived here? Whose area was it? And it said, it's the Father's building. And you know, it shocked me because we didn't hear it at the time. And then when we heard it, and I was like, oh my God, wait a minute, play that back. So, you know, I was like, man, I'm actually got goosebumps talking about it because it was so strange because you could feel a presence. And I'm not one of these, I'm sensing the spirit, you know, I'm not that guy. But it's definitely one of those quirky things. It was very palatable. And it was so strange to have a physical interaction, which anyone can say something touched me. I think I saw something. I got goosebumps. That could be the situation. But when you do have EVPs, temperature drops, which we did, shadow things going around, all these weird movements and different pictures of kids hiding in the hallways, and it was super weird, you know. And that's why we included it. That actually is what spurred me to decide to write about it because of our experiences. And then researching more, that's when I learned about the cryptids. That's when I learned about Slack Farm and the desolation and pillaging of this ancient Mesopotamian mound cultures, basically funeral mounds. And then it actually went to the point where it changed the way we treat Native American remains now. I mean, it was a benchmark, you know, DC life-changing event. So once I seen all that, and I started hearing the different little folk tales and just the really strange stuff, you know, like we were talking about the priest that was missing a face and the sooty, seemingly demonic creature that was like quoting Latin and things like that in this one of the old buildings. I was like, geez, I've got to write about this. How, you know, it amazed me no one else had. But a lot of times, like the penitentiary, just like Western Lunatic Asylum, which is Western State now, it's very they keep it very close to their chest. Because they don't want people making fun of them. Nobody wants to look like a kook, and you know, it's sort of like dirty laundry. You know, you just don't air it. But again, I did my best to represent it in not a mocking way or a sensationalist kind of fashion. You know, I tried to go about it as respectfully as I could, and hopefully that was conveyed in my writing.
No, there's, you know, like you said at the beginning of the show, you know, you listen to the eyewitnesses' accounts, and you know, pretty much just stuck to the facts of what was conveyed to you.
Right. Well, I mean,
it's just straight reporting.
Right. I mean, of course. I mean, if they say it's a sooty figure, you know, I have to go, okay, are we talking about like a waxy, oily type residue? Did it leave tracks? Did it have a smell? You know, I really had to kind of dig into it to get more details because I want to do that. You know, I'm not Hemingway, but you know, I want you to know what the pear tastes like, the texture of it, you know, all that stuff, the lingering nuances and notes of flavor on it. You know, I know it sounds very high-minded, but I want it to be as immersive as I can possibly get it, if I can say it properly. I think that's what makes the story, and for me, the storytelling is what it's about. Because again, like we've talked before, you know, like you're a writer and an author, and I'm like, I'm a storyteller, and I'm a collector of stories, and if it comes through in the writing, great. You know, I'm happy, and you know, I did my best. But my main thing is that the story has heart, it's as close to factual as possible, and it's entertaining. You know, because it's not entertaining, who wants to read it?
Yeah, and you know, with the Black Nun case, yeah, okay, you have an accident, you know, just something very unfortunate that happened, and the nun died from her injuries. And then you have, you know, later on, during one of the investigations, someone took a photo, and when the photo was developed, there's like a little child's face behind like a medical chart, or there's like one of those. Like
a push along, like you would see in. I'm trying to think if you've ever been anywhere where like say even at a preschool. I mean, it's all industrial type of stuff. You know, kind of a table with kind of like a lip around it, so whatever you're pushing doesn't roll off as you're rolling. And they would have medicine, or they would have, you know, whatever they want on it. If it's, you know, bringing books around, that way it doesn't roll off.
That was it was just an interesting juxtaposition from having a story of an accidental death versus the shocking revelation of a ghostly child's face appearing behind something. You would. You know, that's what's intriguing about like the St. Vincent, your book, St. Vincent's Academy, where it's associated with St. Vincent de Paul. You know, he was like 17th century church figure, and you know, he was like the patron of the Sisters of Charity. So, you kind of think that, okay, as the burned nun is, winding down her life from the accidents, that she would be more apt to just realize, okay, just time for me to go to heaven, for my good deeds, and that kind of thing. But she's there, stays there. I don't know if it's just horrible conditions under which she died. But then you get the little kid there. You're like, it's difficult to explain why the child would still be there at. Was he abused at the school? Do we even know? Like, what's the residue of the child being in the photograph?
Right.
At 3:00 in the morning.
What facilitated that?
Yes.
That the what you call it, either the residue of the spirit of the child, or kind of locked the kid into what sort of condition, or what may have locked him in. As far as I know, I never heard anything in regards of abuse. I never heard, obviously, again, I'm very respectful, because first thing people, that who aren't Catholic hear is like, oh, well, I guess one of the priests got him or something. And I'm like, no. I heard nothing like that. only heard
Can I
positive
give
things
an opinion?
about. Lay it on me.
Very often when spirits are young, children, they will return or cling to what they've known as home. It's very likely that this child had been there for a very long time, and that this was the only home that he knew.
Right. Well, and
Okay.
if you even talk to, if you've talked to people who worked in hospices and things, a lot of times, the person may be 90 years old, but who's going to come for them? Their mom or their dad? Or they can go, oh, I see that field I played in when I was 5. That's where I'm going now. We're not that different from fish. We kind of go back where we respond, and we go back to what's comfortable and what's those purest times. And, when I had spoke to the lady that allowed us to go through and investigate it, we were talking about it because at first I knew nothing about the photo. I mean, we took a photo of it, and it was dim. It was kind of dark. The hallway was well lit, or well lit as it could be, and but it was very strange. And then we took more photos of the same hallway, and it was clear. And this was shortly after the slamming of doors and whatnot. And it wasn't until later that I was playing with the picture and trying to bring up the resolution, because I was like, I don't know what would have caused this, And I was thinking, well, maybe if something reflected off something real bright close, and it would oversaturated the picture and did something weird. And I was like, well, it's not that. And so I just played with it. And for some reason, something kept drawing to me, that little medical cart. And I kept zooming in and cleaning it and zooming it and cleaning it. And I was like, that looks like eyes. That looks like the outline of some sort of little kid's face. And when I spoke to Tanya later after that, I said, look at this. Tell me if you see something here. And messaged me back, and they're like, oh, my God. I said, which hall is this? And I told them which hall it was. And I said, this is where I was hearing the little boy. And she said, there was a little boy we had here named Ryan. And he had passed. And he loved to play hide and go seek under the little medical cart. Slide over. The kids would climb under where they're pushing where you would serve the food to the wherever, and they had like a little curtain over it, like that. And it was funny. He loved it. That was his funnest thing to do. And maybe there's an element of that boy, and it's not that it's necessarily that he's trapped in this purgatory or whatever, but there's a little element of that joy left there. And he got me, he spooked me, and so I'm like, hey, way to go, Ryan, and I have to look at it like that, because whenever you deal with children's spirits or what appear to be children's spirits, it really bothers me. Being a father of 2 children that had died due to medical issues, that really gets me, where I live. And there was another story, as I'd mentioned, about the galloping down the hallway. This was a situation. We had voice recorders put in different locations in the hallway, because it's sort of a T-shaped hallway, and then the main foyer, which is a commons area. And then at the end of it was the nurses' area and the administration rooms and offices. Well, we had a few team members who smoked, and they said, well, look, can we go outside for a minute? Whatever. I never allow smoking inside or anywhere I'm taking photographs. I prefer not to. If there's even a chance that you may be getting that on your photos, you have to question every photo you get. So we went outside. The lady secured the door. We come in one door and out one door. It's the same door, and we secured it. We stepped probably about 25 feet away from the building. And they were smoking along a tree line, and we were just kind of sitting there and letting them get done. We go back in there, and, again, a lot of times you don't catch it on the investigation. You catch it in the review. So I'm sitting at home, and I'm listening to this, and you start hearing just off in the distance. I heard like a plop, plop, almost like someone was in flip-flops or barefoot. It was kind of a slap, slap, slap. And I was like, well, maybe something fell off a push board. Maybe something slid over, fell off, who knows. But we were all outside. And then it happened again. Clop, 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 slap, slap, clop, clop. And it got really close. And it actually come up to where the recorder was, stopped for a moment, and then continued on. And that kind of hopscotch kind of, like almost like you're riding a broom or a mop, like it's a pony, like kids did in the old days. Well, again, I found this a few days later and recontacted the lady and said, do me a favor, listen to this. And I said, no, there was nobody inside, right? There was nothing. There was no air kicking on or nothing. No. And I said, you can literally hear it coming closer. It's kind of a Doppler effect where it's like click, 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 and it fades. And she explained that there was a girl there who also had died, and she loved to gallop around like a little pony. She loved it. It was just what she did. It was a fun time for her. And she died a little bit older. She was there longer. And that was probably one of the loudest EVPs we got, which I guess the longer you're there, maybe the more whatever of your personal frequency is left. I don't know. But that was two very strong, compelling things that we got from there. And it was actually one of the more haunted areas that we located because, you know, you go to investigate a place. Sometimes you go there, you go, oh, this is like kind of a cool little place, neat little graveyard. Well, maybe this was an old Civil War area, or, you know, it's not always real ghoulish or somebody's home that's having paranormal activity. But because I really didn't know what we were going to get. I just heard a lot of stories that people said they heard and felt and seen things. But when you're there and you actually have it happen yourself, that's when it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe they're factual about this. You know, not that I'm saying people lie, but people's minds play tricks on them. And when you're having, you know, quantifiable experiences that you can go here, this is what I got. This is the audio. This is the video. This is the temperature drops. This is, you know, it's hard to kind of poo-poo that off. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Steve, you know, a few minutes ago, Barbara mentioned that, you know, maybe the best explanation for that child showing up behind the medical carts was, you know, that was what he saw as his home. That's a very reasonable explanation. But you know, you also have another interesting child story where he was like a stowaway in the car, and there was the car wreck by the bridge.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of trying to link the two. And then I had a little, a comment at the end, you know, just kind of creating a little contrast of different stories that you present in book.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too. With each book, I try to do something a little different. Obviously, you know, the Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary touched on what. And a lot of people, I mean, some people are more sensitive to it, but a lot of times people go, well, these are convicts, these are murderers, these are rapists, child killers, whatever. Of course they're going to be haunting that place. I'm glad to hear it. You know, that's how a lot of people were, especially, you know, in a more kind of conservative area. That's just how it is. You know, it's like they're stuck in the prison. Good. What's the problem? You know, that's a very, I don't know, you know, a kind of stoic way to be about it, but that's how some people are. Well, then the Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum, that's a little different. You know, these people were in there not necessarily by their own choice or by their own control. You know, sometimes, now don't get me wrong, there were some people in there that had committed crimes and did heinous stuff, but they were deemed not in their right mind and not competent. And then you did have some young children who would end up there from the local poorhouse, which was on the same property, but just a different building. So that had a different element of going, oh, well, these people are sort of marginalized. It's a different class of haunting. Well, and then here comes book 3, the Hauntings of the St. Vincent Academy, even more so, you know, because it ties in with a lot of religious elements and imagery and things like that. So, and it also, again, had a investigation on one of the sites. So I was trying to change it up and add little elements. And again, this had that story. We had the story that was talking about the there was rivers that come together. I believe it's the Wabash Rivers, and this is where like we had the riverboat captain who had lived there, and he had a bride, and she died, and he would stay in her mausoleum and whatnot, and she was in a glass top coffin because he couldn't bear to be rid of her, and I'm sure there's probably some stories out there, something like that. Sometimes you're going to have that kind of story, like, well, somebody gave somebody a ride. They take them to the house. They look back, they're gone, but their sweater's there. They take the sweater up to the door. Oh, that was my daughter's. She died 5 years ago on that road. That kind of, almost like urban legends. And so I want people to know that there are things that tie in with that type of thing. Like people getting stalled out on a train track and somebody getting pushed across and it hits them, and then like we have Gravity Hill in Princeton, here in my town, and they talk about, if you park at a certain spot, unseen hands will push you up the hill. I've done it. I don't know if it's a play of kind of an optical illusion, but definitely have had that done, and it's pretty freaky. But yeah, I mean, there's different little elements like that in there. But what was the comment you were going to put on that?
Oh, when there was the car wreck, and the child died, and the ghost appeared in the area, and even a few years later, when the bridge was torn down,
right.
the ghost of the child is still appearing, and despite all,
literally walking where the bridge was in the time of its death. Yes.
Yeah, and despite there being changes in the environment, that's another case where, contrasting with Barbara's explanation of the earlier child, this one just seems like stuck in a cycle in the same area, despite the environmental changes and maybe a new bridge was built, or the old one was torn down that was associated with his death. It was just an interesting view of how children appear as ghosts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll make one similar example and interject my personal feelings on it. There was, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was an abbey. I believe it was in England or Ireland, and there had been a spiral staircase that was removed when they redid this church or abbey or whatever, and you could still see these hooded monks going up in a circle on what appeared to be a phantom staircase. If you're a fan of sci-fi as I am, I don't really look at time as what we think of as time. I think it's all kind of all together, smashed together in different layers, and depending on what frequency you are, I think you are at different frequencies as a child, as you are as an adult, as you are as an old person, as you are as a spirit. And you gain certain things, you let go of certain things, and that's just the nature of time and space and spirit. I think it's all these three things are together. That's my personal thing. But I think more often than not, a lot of times in the stories that I do, it's not even always so much the place that's necessarily haunted. A lot of times people are haunted too, and they bring their own conditions and their own sort of thing. I've heard people talk about. We were mentioning purgatory, and again, I'm not Catholic by faith. I'm probably more of an agnostic, but I've heard people talk about having near-death experiences, and they kind of had a life review and said, look, you choose where you want to go. If you want to go to heaven, you want to go to hell, you want to stay here, whatever. And either they would choose to go to hell, or they would choose to stay in purgatory because they didn't feel they were necessarily evil enough to go to hell, but definitely wasn't, angelic and benevolent enough to go to heaven. So they made their own conditions. It's that old thing of like in school where you grade your own papers, and we go on, go on trust on this. So it's kind of like that, So that's just my opinion.
Okay. And Steve, and we come back to maybe we'll just stick with it now since you just mentioned the purgatory. The Catholic Church has like the concept of purgatory. Dante wrote the second of the Divine Comedy based on purgatory, but the Protestants say that there really isn't a biblical foundation for it. It's either heaven or hell. It's either one or the other. There's no middle ground.
Right.
I don't. With these child ghosts or even the black nun, it does kind of seem like a purgatory. That they aren't. They're kind of like in this waiting room to go somewhere.
Well, I mean, to jump somewhat from the Catholic side of it, but also still touches on the idea of contrition and sort of making dues for your past sins and stuff. If you look at like Skinwalker Ranch, just like down at the Slack Farm area, which I kind of call that our, my Western Kentucky Skinwalker Ranch, because they report seeing dogmen and things like that, and Bigfoot type creatures around where as we'd mentioned, the Native American graves were desecrated. And even after all that happened, it seemed like it picked up having these creatures around there, which maybe they're there as protectors. Maybe I don't know. But, some of that could be connected with the people that lived there. Maybe for whatever reason they felt bound to the land or felt bound to the bodies or bound to that particular mound, which again, you look at it in regards of like metaphysics, you have converging rivers there and different things. I would be curious to learn if there's ley lines there, if it touches on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The confluences were considered to be places like a PowerPoint, places of spiritual energy.
Right. Well, I mean, if you even go further back, and again, I'm kind of drifting from it, but I'm trying to make a point. If you get into certain beliefs about witches, like old school cauldron witches and even vampires, some said that they could not move across, moving water, running water.
Right.
And so it kind of goes back further, though, because of one of the things in a lot of religions is baptism. And so water is all considered part of that cleansing and that sort of channeling of an energy. I mean, you talk about people who douse. I douse when we ghost hunt. So, or I guess investigate. I don't hunt ghosts. I don't have any heads on my wall. But, there's an energy. I'm just saying, there's an energy that's connected with everything. I'm not an animist. I'm not in the Native American belief that necessarily everything has a soul, but I think everything has an energy signature. Everything definitely has a radiation signature. I've seen back in the day, especially in the 70s, like on In Search Of, you'd see them do pictures of plants. One's talked to very positively, one's kind of berated and talked down to or ignored. And its energy signals are totally different. And they'll take a section of the plant. One is pretty healthy, the other one's scattered and just broken down. So I do think all that ties in together. I say I'm not a metaphysical guy, but the further I get in my life, the more I kind of am taking on certain elements of that, just because you can't immerse yourself in this type of study and not start finding some commonalities and some universal truths. And I go a lot on my gut. That's just from being, prison guard and being in law enforcement. You learn to trust your gut. And, if it feels right and it serves to get the job done and it's not hurt anybody and it's your personal truth, I say go for it.
Okay. And yes, and so you're just giving us a little of your own personal philosophy. Does being growing up Southern Baptist influence, working with a Catholic institution, or how did some of the other eyewitnesses and the backgrounds that you get present about them, like the Southern Goth girl? How do all these different backgrounds affect working at on a religious property?
Well, wow, man, that's a question. Well, let me say this. I grew up. Yes, this is a very Baptist, Southern Baptist especially, which is a strange kind of mixture. You kind of had the Protestant Reformation, and then it touches off into a little bit of the holiness thing, which a lot of people here kind of believe in the rapture and whatnot. That's fine, whatever. But that was actually a relatively new belief of people just, driving down the street in their car and jump up into the sky and whatnot. But, as a child, like I said, I went to Baptist churches. I went to holiness churches. I had friends who were Catholic. I never could really do all the stations and all that. I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. And then, as a young man, I'd even studied a little Judaism. So, I wanted to have an idea because I was searching for something beyond us. That's kind of what it was. And not to say that researching is my religion, but it's definitely something that I've been able to find what I feel are some truths. So it's, again, if it ain't, if it serves you and it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? So, but as of how did
I was just going to say, your characters also seem to be searching too.
I guess you're right.
At least some of them are, like the Southern Goth girl.
Right. Well, there's a thing about, how do I say it? Sometimes, this is going to sound so sitcom-y, but sometimes it's true. It's like that thing, like you're looking for love, and the minute that you stop searching, it finds you. Or you're trying to do a crossword puzzle. Let's do something a little bit less grandiose. You're doing a crossword puzzle, and all the letters are just running together. You take a break from it, you come back, boom, and then you can find what you're looking for, or whatever. Word searches. Sometimes you have to open your mind up, and I think part of that is sort of like if you talk to anybody, if they do automatic writing. I'll do that a lot with my writing. I'm not saying I'm, a ghost help me write my book, but I'll kind of clear my mind, and I'll look at a screen, or if I do chalk art and also some painting, and I'll sit there and I'll just kind of go in a little circle. I'm not walking around in a circle, but my hand kind of going a little bit of circle above it, and I'm like, what am I supposed to draw today? And whatever comes to me, I draw it. So does that say I'm connected with a spirit guide or Uncle Wally or the Easter Bunny? I don't know. But I'm definitely not going, I'm not hearing anything. You know what I'm saying? I'm not hearing voice, but you kind of get a feel for what the paper wants. I know that sounds really weird. It's almost like someone who carves a log, or someone who takes driftwood and makes art out of it and says, this feels like a snake. Okay, this feels like a squirrel. And they make it because there's properties in that wood and maybe knots and shapes that endear it to looking like that. So they go with that. That's what I do. But I do think, I guess you're right. You write what you know, and most people we were talking about H.P. Lovecraft. Mm-hmm. Loved his work, but he was definitely xenophobic. And that was one of those things of the time, and did not trust foreigners. It was, especially during the time, stuff like it happens now. But it was a thing where personal ideas and prejudices, prejudices aren't always bad. It's just like what you've known, what you've been taught, and that's just part of you. You're not making a conscious attempt to necessarily be one or the other, but that's just how you're charged up. You can work against that, and you should, if it's something negative. But all I'm saying is, yes, everyone would bring something like that in that searching capacity. Because I don't think you do research if you think you got all the answers, and if you do, why are you doing it?
Yeah, and you have the one sample of the girl was in what like they were fleeing the property, and there's like the flying shadow person cryptid type thing after, and she said the Lord's Prayer, and I don't think she didn't seem to be like super religious, but she kind of had to resort to that to hopefully get the thing to stop chasing her. And there's kind of a searching thing. Like the paranormal changed her.
Absolutely,
it was an interesting story.
Well, a lot of these were paradigm shifts for these people. These were benchmark moments, and the reason I included this, again, I'm not particularly religious. I'm not anti-religious. It's just, I'm not a preacher. I don't do sermons, and I don't do really like Sunday morning church talk. There's a bunch of that. That's just not what I do. Sometimes it feels like church if we're all talking about, we've been mentioning God here. We have, 3 people that constitutes a church. So I guess we're having church service today, huh? But it's a thing where when I was a small kid, I saw a shadow figure, and I may have told you this. In my room, I had a friend spending the night, and I forgot what we watched. Something like Hellraiser or something. And I kept picking at him about it and making kind of spooky voices and stuff. I could always do voices. And it was, again, in western Kentucky, and at the time we were living in county. The city hadn't grown big enough to be considered in county yet. We still had a gravel road. And there was no lights. I mean, lights go out, it's night, man. It's dark. And so it was fairly dark anyway. And the room started getting kind of cool. It's a summer night, and it was getting really chilly. And my friend was like, "Hey, do you feel?" I said, "Yeah." "Are you cold?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm cold." And we had blankets. And something drew our attention to my doorway. It was an open doorway, and the doorway was probably 7 foot tall, and we saw an outline of something, almost looked like a hooded figure. Like, think of Andre the Giant in that scene from Princess Bride, which I love that movie. Anyway, and that big hulking guy, when he says, "I've come for your souls." That was the worst Andre, but anyway. It was a huge hulking guy. I mean, he wasn't cute or fuzzy. He was scary, and he was blacker than black because the background was black, but he was inky black and hollow. It was almost like somebody cut a hole in a picture and laid it over, facing out into a deep hallway. It's hard to describe. It reflected no light at all, and you could feel almost like the wind was being sucked toward it. Extremely weird. And so my friend, he freaks out. He's trying to go through the wall because we're not close to our window, which I'd had a fan in the window because it's summer. And anyway, it notices, I feel that it notices that we see it, and it starts to glide into the doorway, into the room. And of course, we're both freaking out. Neither one of us was asleep. We were kids, I mean, we weren't drinking, smoking, anything. So we see this thing, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I'm going to have to get my mom or something because I'm a kid. Now, we had a pool light in the middle of the room. It was an older house. So I kind of stand up, which can't believe I did it. I guess I was just so scared I was stupid. And it starts moving quicker toward me. You might want to give it a second. Here comes our train. Well,
let's go.
The show train.
Hey, it's a nice atmospheric effect. There's like,
it is thundering, and it is thundering and lightning here as well. So you're getting the full meal deal with my sound effects.
Hey, that's cool.
I've actually got some ghost stories about that particular train track that I'm eventually going to write about an old hobo that used to come to town 60s and 70s and ended up dying from exposure on the train tracks, and people will still see him walking around with like phantom lights, stuff like that, next to tracks, stuff like that. The train conductors that I know, I have some family that work on the trains, and they've heard stories about. His name was Peg Leg Lock. If you look up Peg Leg Lock on Google, anybody, you'll actually find a little folk song somebody wrote about him back in the 70s. And you'll also see that he died of exposure. And he was a simple guy, but he was a good guy. He did a lot of yard work for people, and he would catch the train and go back to wherever he lived. But sometimes he would start a fire here overnight to keep warm, and then when the fire died down, he'd move it out of the way, lay a piece of cardboard in a blanket, and he'd lay on that warm spot, and it would keep him warm overnight. But it was one night was particularly cold, and he just didn't make it. But that's a story for another time. But so back to the shadow figure. I jump up, and it's about 2 or 3 feet away from the edge of my bed. So I go, for some reason, way back to Jesus Loves Me, This I Know, for the Bible tells me so, little, that song, like a preschool song. I start singing it. It gets fast. I grab the little string, pull it, fall on the bed, cover our heads up. We're both sitting there shaking, sweating. We're waiting a second. We're for sure it's going to gobble us up to pieces, and nothing happens. The room starts to warm back up. The wind, that weird kind of sucking wind, stops, and the fan starts acting right again. And throw the cover back, and it's gone. And that was the last night my friend spent the night at my house.
I wonder why.
I don't know. Well, you know what? I think we'd talked before about, I had a friend, we were camping out in our backyard. He would camp in the yard with me. And we had a little fire going, and then had some bricks set up and had like a small fire pit. And we were watching the moon, and I actually saw something in the sky. It was too big. It was definitely not a cloud, because it went like it was going to go across the moon from the right, but it disappeared, almost like it did a slight turn to the right and went in straight behind the moon and just kept going further out. Me and my friend watched this. It was probably 45 seconds to a minute, but when it was said and done, we looked like we'd lost 5 minutes. I don't know what happened. We never saw anything land. But who knows? Again, weird stuff. I just had a series of weird stuff happen, and is it all related? Is there a reason that I follow metaphysical and paranormal and esoteric subjects? I don't know. Maybe not, but I don't know. Maybe I'll get the answers, because again, I'm searching like all those guys in my books too.
And you just mentioned in your autobiography you just told, you mentioned there was a cold spot when Marla Ventura was our guest, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or so. She was discussed the Bram Stoker chapter that she has in her vampires and werewolves and banshees book, where there's like one area, just like this town had a snowstorm during the summertime or something like that. It was just concentrated in one area, and we spoke a little bit about it, that cold spot. So, that seems to be a pattern going back, a documented phenomenon going back to at least the 1890s.
Well, further than that, I think.
Yeah, it probably goes back much further. I'm just that was just one that came to mind. But right. What you're explaining seems to be part of a long-standing pattern.
Yeah. Well, again, I think we were made by the Creator or whoever, the Draconians or whoever you believe made us, with curiosity, and I don't think it was a joke. I don't believe in a God that would give you a curiosity to learn and to know and to ding you for it. I think if we are of God, big G, small g, whatever, that we were, what was the term? I forgot who said it. Endowed with our Creator with certain inalienable rights, right? And one of those
Thomas
things
Jefferson.
There it is. And I was thinking it was that or Deputy Dog. It was one of the others. You remember that scene with Deputy Dog? No, it never existed. But I could talk about a whole slew of Mandela effects that never happened that I remember. But anyway, but no, there's that thing. We are naturally hardwired to go, but why? I mean, look at any 3-year-old. you're going to get but why all day. That's the nature of it. And I think some things we're ready to hear and some things we're not ready to hear. And, I would like to think, if there is a great beyond when I go across and hopefully be with my son and my daughter, they'll teach me some stuff, and I can learn some of that stuff. Part of me thinks it would be great if I could come back, but I also think, what if you knew all that and you come back, but you can't prove any of it? Would it make you crazy?
That's a good point. I think we do this internet radio and ask all these questions. Why? Probably because we haven't evolved much more than beyond 3, but that's for another show. But
right.
It is when you start thinking about the things that the stories that you're presenting, what's the explanation? There are patterns that just keep reappearing in documented cases. People, I'm sure a lot of people haven't read the one like lost chapter that Bram Stoker wrote, but it's just that pattern that keeps reappearing. That a lot of people just say, why is that happening? Why are we experiencing this? Why do some? I've never seen a ghost, even though slept in a room where a crime happened. There's still the blood stains on the wall and carpets, and after watching the Monster Chiller or Horror Theater all evening long and going to bed at 10 years old, just kind of prepped to see something like that, and nothing ever happened. Why didn't I experience that and someone else does who wasn't anticipating seeing a ghost?
Right.
It's just I just wonder, why are some people more open than others? Why they have the experience?
I don't know. I mean, for me, I think we all have our skill set. Some people, just like in any controlled experiment, you have to have a control. You have to have sort of the what do you want to call it? The non-indoctrinated, or what do you call it? The unbaptized. They have not went over to that step, because, like I said, you can always have curiosity and wonderment about things, and even after you've seen something, if you're going to look at it in a subjective way, you have to question everything you've seen. But I think it's necessary, because you get a room full of 100 people and 90 of them swear they seen a Bigfoot, or they experienced that, or they levitated, or whatever. It's not much of a discussion. You have to have conflict, and I'm not saying infighting, but entropy is the only insured thing we have in the universe. I mean, at least that's the way I feel. You constantly have waves coming back and crashing the edge of a continent, and it's constantly shaping it. And mountains go up and mountains come down. I know I'm sounding a little hippy dippy, but there it is. But there's a thing of if you completely jump full headlong into something without being subjective, you're going to lose respectability if that's what you're going for. But also you're not going to grow. If you are preaching to the converted, pardon the pun, you're not going to grow. You have to have somebody to go, well, I don't know, I'm not sure if I believe that. Well, what about this? And then maybe that it's not right, but it's discussion. You have to have that, or you're not going to have growth. That's why, like in the great schools of the early Greeks and Romans and stuff, it was open, and you could challenge the teacher and you could ask questions in a respectful way and bring up discourse. And that's something that I won't preach. I promise I wasn't going to preach, but it's something that I see sometimes slipping in modern paranormal stuff. Sometimes it's all in, well, of course it's this and that. Well, of course this happened. Of course Roswell happened like this. Of course, the Loch Ness Monster did this. Or no, this isn't real because we all say it isn't real. I'm sort of that guy that I'm enough of the control, like yourself, to go, well, wait a minute. This is something that's really hard to quantify. You have to be able to ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, it's sort of dead in the water. So, I don't know. I think that, and then you may very well have some sort of experience that you may come back and go, wow, I really wish I hadn't had that. Maybe there's a reason you've not had that. But you've had different types of, experiences with different stuff in regards of researching and whatnot. So, like, I don't know. If I've walked up on and dealt with pretty much full-bodied apparitions, to kind of coin Ghostbusters. It wasn't fun. It wasn't cheery. It scared the crap out of me. And like that type of encounter happened once, and I'm not too keen on it happening again, because it was a really dark entity. Because a lot of times hate has a little bit more juice. It manifests better. And I only saw it once, and I don't want to see it again. I've had dreams about it, nightmares and stuff. I know that might sound weak, but, there's a price for anything like that. There's, like the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. He walked away a sadder but wiser man. That's the nature of this, with knowledge and things like that. Was it ignorance is bliss? You're going to use that old adage. But you have to balance it, and so yeah. I mean, I think everyone has different skill sets, and I think everyone sees things when they're, I don't want to say when they're ready for it or when they need it or when they're open to it. And, that's not the answer you wanted, but that's the only one I got.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was, just after watching all the Christopher Lee Hammersmith stuff all evening, and, damn right, see, the ghost face appear in the closet or something like that. Never, never happened.
Also, so yeah, if the a ghostly image of Ingrid Pitt wants to show up for me, that's not a problem. But the stuff I seen wasn't too tantalizing. It was pretty dark. But I don't know if you've ever tried scrying before. Studying a still thing of water, or studying a mirror or whatnot. I do have friends that do a lot of split, or like 4th, 5th, 6th generational. Basically, I wouldn't say occultist, more like a spiritualist, kind of like Dan Aykroyd, his family is. And and they gave me different little tips on, because a lot of times before I do anything, I don't consider myself a meditative guy, but I slow down, I get really still, and I prepare myself for what I'm getting ready to go into. I used to do this when I played in music. I used to play in metal bands and rock bands, of all things. And as crazy and loud and screamy as that was, you get really quiet before you go outside. You prepare yourself. It's like, what was it? You ever seen the movie Dr. Detroit? I know I make a lot of media references. Dan Aykroyd.
I missed that one.
Oh, gosh, you need to see this. He played this character called Dr. Detroit. Anyway, and he was getting ready to have to go up against some people. And he talks about in the tents, you can hear the clang and readiness of armor as the knights prepare for their battle. It's like that. It's a real Zen thing. I know I probably sound nutty saying that, but you center yourself and something's coming. Something good, you open yourself up enough to the positive. I wouldn't really try to go toward the dark. Definitely, you may not be able to get rid of it. Open yourself up for something positive. In time it'll come. I believe that.
Oh, I'm not asking for it. I'm just saying, hey, this never happened.
Yeah. I mean, I think it will. I sincerely think it will.
Oh, it's just, hey, I'm so busy with everything else. I don't have time to sit there and wait for ghosts to show up. But
that's exactly it. That is exactly it. No, listen to me. Your words of going, I'm so busy, I'm telling you, it's just like if you're walking. The reason people see more things at night, you're standing in a football field in the middle of the day. Short of you setting off a stick of dynamite, you could play with 3 or 4 flashlights. No one's going to notice it driving by. It's 2 a.m. It's pitch black. Your mind is in a different mode. Your brain chemistry is different. It's just a fact. It's just how our bodies work. Mm-hmm. You will see things more readily because in the dark is danger, and our lizard brains react differently. If you can ever slow down, especially at night, and you probably will see some. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Or Mark, you see,
right.
or Mark, you see something and you dismiss it or explain it away as something else.
That's very possible too.
Maybe I'm just really a very boring person, and ghosts just don't want. I don't know. I'm just saying. I just never had the experience. Never saw a UFO. I just. I mean. Maybe we ought to take a couple weeks off, and I don't have to read anything, and I won't be so busy, and maybe I'll get a visitation. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if you, I can't remember if I ever asked you. Do you draw or do anything like that? Paint?
Yeah.
Anything?
Yeah, I do a little bit of painting.
I would. This is my suggestion, and this is just what works for me. A lot of times, like when I was writing about like the haunting of the St. Vincent Academy, I would either have old like mass music from masses, like the earliest versions I could find, playing like softly. Gregorian chants. I would have that playing very low behind me as I'm writing, or a lot of times I listen to. I don't know why this is. I have a draw there, and maybe I don't know. Maybe it's from a previous life. Who knows? 1920s and 30s music. For whatever reason, that or chamber music, old music, or if you have something like that has ambient music that doesn't really have words, doesn't really have a specific rhythm, it seems like for me anyway, frees up my mind. And some days it's hard to. It is really hard because if you're used to going bang, 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 I have to get this done, I got to get this written, I have to have this ready, I got to go handle this for the kids, we're gonna have the grandkids over, blah blah blah. It's hard to kind of go, okay, I'm taking a little me time, shut myself off, and just float in the ether. I know a lot of people talk about the ether. I believe the ether is real. Even scientists are saying there are something between the molecules. And so, I don't know, maybe I am closer to a spiritualist than not. But I definitely think there's something out there, and there's something in us. It's all connected. We aren't different from it. There's no us and them. It's just the collective we. Wow, now I really do sound like a hippy dippy, but it just seems like a universal truth to me.
But then I am a spiritualist, so yeah, you should try the solfeggio music if you're looking for great music.
Awesome.
Because
send me a link and I'll check it out.
Yeah, solfeggio deals with frequencies, so it puts your mind in an alpha theta state, so that you are more inclined, adaptable, or linked to that section of yourself that is of a creative nature. Cool stuff.
Well, I know that my youngest kid, whenever he does college work, he'll sit and kind of listen to ambient music, which I kind of got him into, like 80s synth and goth music a little bit, and stuff just that. Like New Order and sort of synthy pop stuff, but it's got enough of kind of that, with the chants, a little bit Gregorian type stuff, and it's got a little bit of that, like you said, kind of hammer film quality to it that actually lets them kind of open their head up, and they're not following the lyrics as much, just listen to the beat and the tempo and the rising and the falling of the musical scale, and again, floats with it. You open yourself up. We're not really. I think we're more or less using our bodies as a tether point in this reality, and we're everywhere. I mean, we are as stuck here as we want to be. That's why you talk to a lot of guys, and I have, that are inmates, lifetime inmates. And when I first started there, I was like, I don't know if you've ever asked this, and I don't, whatever. And he says, well, if it's a murderer, it's like, well, I don't really want to talk about my crimes. No. How do you not go bonkers? How do you deal with being in here? He says, well, I'm not. He says, I am. I'm not crazy. I know where I'm at. He said, but my mind is everywhere else. You know, I don't necessarily concentrate that I'm there with my family because that will make me nuts. You know, if they have a son or a daughter on the outside, but I focus on, you know, other pursuits and studying myself, trying to make myself more a high-minded person. And, you know, there are a lot of people that are consider themselves religious and that are incarcerated. And there's a reason for that. We go by nature to try to go to a little bit of a higher vibration, and we don't even know it. You know, like I've told you before, I don't know if this is something that's spiritual or this is something that's that, but my gut tells me to do it. That little inner voice, or not a voice, but that inner prompting that goes, I don't know why, but I did this and it helps. You know, I think we know how to fix ourselves in a lot of things, but we've disconnected from our spiritual side, and hence we've lost that.
And Steve, since we've gotten a lot of Western points of view, you said, maybe we've lost some aspects of understanding ghosts of the ancestors or relatives. You've also done some international traveling. You've been to Thailand. What are some of the differences in like a Asian country versus what we are experiencing here in America?
Well, and understand, you know, my time in Thailand, and, you know, like I was in Japan for a very short time, but mainly in Bangkok, Thailand. But that's primarily, you know, I'm trying to say Muslim, like Buddhist. And our little boy who had passed was Buddhist. I have his little Buddha sitting here on the table in front of me. That's just sort of like a little grounding thing for me. So, but yeah, it's very much there every day. You get into cabs, if you've ever seen like that, you see like sometimes people have flowers and things on their dash, or like almost like smudges on their above their head on the ceiling of the car. You know, it's more or less prayer stuff, and that was very common. There was altars all over the place. The place, it was an interesting spots, because depending, like if you were close to food areas, it smelled a lot like, you know, open street cooking and incense. Mm-hmm. You know, now if you get closer to back streets, you know, maybe you're going through an alleyway, it's going to smell more like, you know, people's trash and incense. I mean, you go anywhere, it's going to be incense in the air. And there was always, you know, flowers displayed, and you know, they just had these little shrines everywhere, and it was very different. It was, and we were there during when they were having a coup of the political parties. And I'm talking people riding up and down roads in those big, like large trucks, like you would haul, like big produce trucks and things. And you'd have people with flags, and I didn't see guns, but I heard there were guns and things, and so it was volatile. They never bothered us, but then again, we never jumped up and down and said, "Hey, we're an American, come please, you know, kidnap us." But overall, everyone treated us very well, and once they kind of knew we were there adopting a little boy, it was different. The religious thing ties into that like this. Some people always, Bangkok is very much a, there's a strong child sex trade there. And, you know, you see a 40-ish year old white guy walking down the street in a sea of Thai people, you know, there's a decent chance he's there to hook up with a kid. Unfortunate, but that's how sometimes it's treated in a more of a third world type situation. It's used for whatever. But so some people would kind of be talking to our little boys, like, do you want to go with these folks? Or, I was just making sure we weren't kidnapping them. I was like, yeah. This is my mom, this is my dad now. Okay, people were fine, but a lot of people were very kind about it. And the thing is, like, do you remember the story of the Elephant Man? I'm not making this comparison to our boy, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Anyone who with special needs or had something going on, they go, oh, well, he has this because his mother went to a fair and an elephant trampled her or scared her. Or this guy has webbed feet because maybe in another life the mother did something bad or whatever. And there's always a condition why something bad is happening sometimes. And that's a little bit of touches a little bit on that, at least what I felt. But because they had ghosts for everything. You cut down bananas, you have to thank the banana tree ghost. I forgot the pronunciation of it. But everything, if you drop food on the floor, do not pick it up. That's for the hungry ghost. If you pick that food up off the floor, you're going to have that ghost after you. And you do not want the hungry ghost after you because it eats everything. So, very different. It was very interesting. It was strange. I've always loved Oriental culture. And don't get me wrong, it was blazing hot there. It was like the hottest day of summer with 100% humidity day and night. And, a sticky mess. But you don't get used to it, but you learn to weather it. And but the people were really good. We stayed at a place. Well, I think it was called the Bangkok Christian Guest House, and most people from the West stay there because they kind of know, if you're trying to be kind of above board and be a good guy, you're not going to go, oh, you're in room 17. You want to send a boy to your room or something? Because there are places like that there that would do that, and they're pretty, high-minded. A lot of them were Christians themselves. And so it's kind of like a hotel, but it's in Thailand. And they were very, 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 very kind to us. But yeah, religiously, it was really strange. I really was endeared to it. Part of me really misses being there, even for the short time we were there, because we were only going to be there for like a week, and the coup happened. They shut down the airport. They shut down the waterways. Cambodia which is on their border, was ramping up military activity. So because of anybody trying to flee over that border, they said they'd shoot them. So I'm like, we're screwed. We're stuck. So instead of us freaking out, we became part of the neighborhood. And we would talk to the merchants, and we would do this and that. And we, that's just what it was. We primarily ate through those merchants. We would get our stuff through the merchants. We would, I would ask them to tell me their stories about their ghost beliefs, their religious beliefs, and it was one of those like, was it? I forgot the holiday. Wasn't it World War I, where the German troops and the English troops come across the lines, and they played rugby and they drank, and it was sort of a day of peace, and then they went back the next day. Christmas, there it is, and obviously we weren't enemies with anybody, but all anybody knew about the West is, oh, you come here for our children. You come here for our women. And, it was good to kind of go, okay, we're not all like that. And we know you're not all looking to kidnap us or do whatever. And, and there's slavery type stuff, sex trade and of all type of races there. So, which is an unfortunate, side effect of some of the conditions there. But there was especially in the shrines, because we were allowed to visit, things like the sleeping Buddha and places like that. But once they understood that, and at this time I wasn't even a writer. I was still a corrections officer at the time, but I told them, I've been a student of esoteric and religious subjects, and want to learn. I want to learn more about your culture. I value your culture, and it's hard for somebody to go, well, if you're earnest about it and they can tell you're earnest about it, they go, we won't talk to you about it. Everybody wants to talk about their experiences. That's human condition. And they were extremely welcoming and opening. But yeah, like I said, little things. If you sit down, don't point your feet at anybody. The feet is considered the dirtiest part, which is funny because even at the child orphanage where we got our son Joseph, you could eat off of it. I mean, it was so clean in there, and the kids were wonderfully taken care of. I know I'm talking about the orphanage. I apologize, but it's not like you would think of like a dilapidated mental asylum, and these kids are in rags and sitting in urine and scabby and nasty and malnourished. I mean, it was an orphanage, but all these people treated them very well. They were like aunties and grandmas and big sisters. They were, because it was primarily ran by women, and these kids were very well adjusted for their condition, and but and that's interesting. A lot of times people look at different cultures as in that Eurocentric. Oh well, we are enlightened. They are barbarians. We are God's people. They are heathens. They are infidels, or whatever term you want to use it. And it was, I can see why guys like Marco Polo and people that traveled really fell in love with some of it, because again, it was a very ancient culture, and I don't know, I just kind of fell in love with it, and the way that they come to ghost culture and ancestral worship, it almost feels more wholesome than what we got. And I'm not talking people's beliefs, it just seems like certain areas come to grips with death and the afterlife and all that, and reincarnation. Almost seems like it's more healthy, because it's not, well, look, okay, we're rolling the dice. All right, pick one between five. You pick three. I'm sorry, you got to burn in hell. It's not like that. You get another chance. You get to learn. You're forever learning, and that's the thing. You only come back if you don't figure it out. It's like a video game with eternal lives. You will get it. Some are on a quick learning curve, some aren't, but that's okay. I
just want to say, what you're talking about with the, little shrines at the vendors. You're also able to go to the more notable national religious figure shrines as well. But even like the little family shrines that you mentioned, it just shows that there's a healthy family connection that just continues on with little memento of grandma. And I think when we had Richard Balthazar on just a couple weeks ago, he said something. He was talking about some of the Mesoamerican cultures that, how was it? Muerto, some festival that's still celebrated in Mexico, in the location he was discussing. It just seems like maybe here in America, after someone dies, just kind of forget about them and go on. But some of the guests we've had on have discussed the strong family connections that remain, even though grandma or grandpa passed away 20 years ago.
Right. Well, there's I think some of that stems from coming through like Europe and the Black Death. We learned to fear the dead because the dead carry disease. And, it's one of those things, it's going to pollute water, it's just going to do this and that. Obviously you can't let something dead fetter and rot in the area, because it's going to get everybody sick. And because of the different stuff it attracts and the bacteria in the body. But, my son's been gone. Well, he's almost going on 5 years now. I kept little key things that meant something to him. He had different little toys or things like that, or little things that me and him played together with. I have it actually on a bookshelf next to my bed. And little things like that. The girls had little things that they played with or whatever, and maybe they used to camp out. One of the girls had a sleeping bag that they used to share. She keeps it in her room. It's actually on her bed. So there's still things like that keep the memory alive. I actually have an alarm for getting up to work, and it always said, "Get up for work and remember Joseph Smile." So, that's our way of doing it. And I don't look at it like he's gone in regards to that, which obviously literally physical parts of him are still here. He was an organ donor, as I will be. But, I would love maybe one day to, if he's here, if it's possible, he can find us. That would make me really happy. Who knows? Maybe next round he'll raise me.
That's an interesting comment.
Well, again, like I said, I'm not particularly traditionally religious, but if there's something that could always bring families back together and all that, I'm all for that. I would hate to think you just lie on the ground. Everybody wants to see their loved ones again. So,
right.
So the paranormal and the research is just kind of keeping that light on, keeping that door open, because like Barbara said, if you kind of shut that part of your brain down, in time you will, just like what's the therapy? You say if you are jumpy about cats or jumpy about whatever, and you slowly get used to being around them. Do I?
No, I say you're talking about a phobia.
Right, or just whatever, something that you have
desensitizing
desensitization to it. I think in time you can push out any opening for any sort of contact. And like I said, even in like in the books, the hauntings of books, you run into certain things where people make contact with loved ones or make contact with people that they've lost, because they do make that allowance for contact and facilitate whatever way mentally, spiritually, for that to happen. I probably should mention just before I forget.
It gives you closure.
Right. Well, and I don't know. Is it closure or is it a continuation of reuniting again? Maybe it's a little bit of both.
Oh, it's that as well. It gives you the confirmation that there is something beyond this dimension.
Right. I did want to say, because we mentioned it a little bit briefly, but I never gave out any web addresses. If anybody's curious about the books, the Hauntings of series are of my podcast, House of Asher, you can go to steveeasher.com. It's all lowercase and together. It's basically the name Steve with an extra E and Asher.com. And it has links to all my books through Amazon. The first two also goes through Simon & Schuster, and there's also links to some of my shows. So I thought I probably should throw that out.
We hadn't forgotten. We're just captivated by what you had to say.
Well, I'm bad with compliments, so thank you. I mean, I don't know. I think you have to look at things differently. That's always been a thing. I don't know. I've always been that why kid. I'd ask questions about, like if you're talking about Sunday school and stuff, okay, well, how did Cain find this wife that wasn't from his town when they were the only people that were there? Was there a town there before? Was there a proto-Adam and Eve?
Right.
Was this clones? Was this aliens? Was it, he killed his brother. You'll never have, grass will never grow on your feet. You'll never have anything. He built the first city. So, it just sort of looks like, you have to question it. Some people say, well, maybe God in time sort of forgave him. I mean, a big stone fell on him, so I don't know how forgiving he was. But, when you're that kid, you make the teachers very nervous, and it's just like, anybody got a question? Not you, Steve. Anybody else? So, yeah, I was like, really, honest to God, I was just earnest to learn, because I was just like, I'm not connecting some of these dots. And I'm not trying to attack dogma. I'm just simply saying, okay, what does this mean? And it stuck. I never lost it, and I guess that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Who do you have coming up on your next show?
Oh, well, let me take a peek here, because I do not want to say this wrong. Let me see. I have an appearance on Tuesday on another show, but as of my show, I'm going to have Robin Moonshadow from the Strange Realms website, does a lot of paranormal esoteric stuff. And then I am going to have on Saturday Archbishop Ron Enright. He is from the Order of Exorcists, and it's sort of an interesting little thing. Again, I don't want to be an exorcist. I don't want to be a demonologist. I've studied somewhat on that, but yeah, you can keep that Emily Rose stuff to yourself. I don't need that. I'll write about it all day, because as you know, some of the stories are kind of a little dark, and but that's okay. I'll sit over here and I'll write about it, and
what's the father's view of exorcism? Is it kind of slowly fading out of practice, or is it actually getting more
more frequent and whatnot?
Yeah, more frequent because the church is seeing that there are evil entities attacking people. What's his take on the situation?
What I'm hearing, not just from him, but from if you just follow, because I do follow different religious sites, and Catholicism Today and things like that, because I kind of like keeping abreast of different stuff. And there was an article, I'll have to try to find it now, where they were talking about they were actually wanting to train, I think it was like 90 or 100 exorcists, because, like you said, things appear to be ramping up. But I think some of that could be either a misinterpretation of spiritual activity, or people are more open to spiritual practices and they don't always take precautions, white light and whatnot, and they're having stuff come in by that way. So I don't know if it's so much that the demons are acting up or the people are given the keys to the house. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about. So
interesting. Okay. And we got sidetracked for a while on other stuff, but just maybe tie in one more sample in the last 10 minutes or so we have left of the show. You mentioned something, a little reference to reincarnation a little bit ago with the organ donors. You did have creepy story of a haunted mirror, and that kind of sounded a little bit like the bordering on the reincarnation type theme, as someone not really finding a termination. They just kind of kept reappearing in the mirror. Can you tell us a little bit about a haunted object?
Well, sure. I mean, and that's the thing, is that especially something that's either multi-generational, something that was with someone through something dark, a fire. I've heard stuff that's come through, like you always heard about, like Robert the Haunted Doll, or you hear about someone brought some rings or something. Maybe they say
from an estate sale or something like that.
Right. Or even, especially things that maybe, again, that was made, generationally before, or even something that the person who lived there made it themselves, or it was connected to whatever, some important moment or whatnot. It does seem that it endears worship. I mean, if you think about it, and how do I say this? And I'm not making light. I'm making comparisons. Hammer films. It doesn't matter if it's Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee or whomever. Dracula backs up off a cross. It's just a piece of metal. Now, some people believe you can strike a vampire with silver as well as a werewolf and it hurt them. But I think that ties into the concept of silver protects you from rot and from disease, and it's a cleanser. It goes kind of back into the alchemistic mindset. Is alchemistic? Is that a word? But
it is now, according to Barbara.
Okay. The judges vote yes.
Yep.
I feel that again, you empower and you engender qualities into certain things. You know, it just is what it is, and what you bring to something sometimes is what you get. I feel that, definitely there are haunted objects. I feel, if nothing more, that it triggers off something in you. Maybe that acts as a trigger object, and it in itself maybe is not imbued with a spirit or something, but it is a trigger thing. Just like maybe you are. How do I put this? Like, say you have asthma. You know, you're going to be in an area that's going to be dusty. Odds are it's going to trigger an asthma attack. If you are a person who is an empath, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an empath, but I think I probably have some of the properties that would constitute an empath. You go in certain areas and certain things that have certain resonances, you're going to pick up on it. And sometimes those people who aren't hip might go, oh, this thing, you ever went somewhere and go, I saw this in a window and it just called to me. How many times have you heard that? And people don't even think about it. You know, oh, I was in this, and it was in this old junk shop and I saw this ring and it just said, buy me. Not literally, but, or whatever. Or, you know, I found, you know, something I've been wanting forever, talking about Hammer films. I want one of those vampire kits. You know, it's got the old crosses and the little derringer and the, just because I'm a nerd. Grew up on all that Hammer film stuff. I love it.
Wooden stake.
Oh, yeah, the wooden crosses. Yeah, all that. And, you know, the little wafers called? Eucharist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to say it wrong.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, you know what I'm talking about.
So some holy water.
Holy water,
no,
the wafers.
The little wafers that
you know,
they give you at
maybe
communion.
Eucharist. That's it. And then you would have maybe something that was made out of a certain type of, maybe made out of dogwood, because you know it's supposedly connected to Christ. Just all kinds of you know, neat little things in there. But do I need it? Probably not. Is it probably imbued with some darkness? Probably, if they've used it to kill somebody or kill what they thought was a vampire. But there's a part of me that really thinks that would look really neat on my wall here in my little studio. Behind me, I have like a wall of stuff. I call it my wall of international horror and intrigue. So it's got all kinds of different stuff from different movies like Silver Bullet and Trilogy of Terror, and you know, my original horror host when I was a kid. So, I mean, I've got all kinds of crazy stuff, but none of it's from anything like that. I'm not. Well, I'll just say this first. I'm not Zach. I'm not buying like Ed Gein's stew pot and Charlie Manson's bones or anything. So I'll keep it kind of mellow. But you're going to find people who do that, but you're also going to find people that are hoping that it's haunted, which scares me, because I'm like, what are you going to do when it actually pops off? You know, the got the tiger by the tail, I think was an old Buck Owens song. You know, what are you going to do when the tiger starts chasing you around? So I do think that it's there. I do think that things hold certain memories and whatnot. And, you know, that's why, especially if you get a house that's older, I say bless it. Get it blessed. Bless it yourself. Say the Lord's Prayer with some, you know, anointed oil or whatever. Go through burnt sage or whatever. Whatever you got to do. Whatever you feel is going to pull positive vibes and, you know, and cleanse your thing. Go for it. You know, couldn't hurt, right?
Right.
That's my feelings on it.
All right. That's great, and you know, we're down to like 4 or 5 minutes left. Can you run your contact information by everyone again. Just make sure we get one last plug in for your
Totally
interesting shows and books.
Oh, sure. You hear the church bells?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm about 2 blocks down from a little Methodist church. I'm telling you, it's like living in like Salem's Lot or something. It's got all this quirky, weird history here, and you got weird haunted trains. You got the churches. One of these days, I'll talk to you more about the body they found under the courthouse that was in the ground that was about 200 years older than the building that was built there. Nobody could explain why it was there, but that's another show. As of my sites, you can find me under Steve Asher, or Stevie Asher, or House of Asher, on Facebook, on Google, on Instagram, on Twitter, and also on, if you go to YouTube, look up House of Asher podcast, or also go to steveeasher.com. That's all lowercase and together, and check things out, or go again to Amazon. That's who's carrying my latest books. You can get it there in their Kindle and also paperback. And if you've got a bookstore, please try to get them to get it in there. I would love to come sign some books and talk to some folks in your neck of the woods, and hear your stories. That's the best part of book signings. You'll hear so many stories, and who knows, maybe one of them might end up one of the books, because several of these did from my first signing. The stories I got in this book came from my first signings. And the follow-up to this, which is going to be Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, Habitual Hauntings, which will be the last of that series, came from all the signings that people send in texts and things like that of stories. So it's a living thing, and people are very much a part of it, and I want to thank people for that. I couldn't do it without you guys. I couldn't do it without your support, and people, and folks like you and Barbara. I don't know how much of a salesman I am. I try to just be kind of earnest and straightforward, and hopefully that comes through. So.
Yeah. I think we had a genuine discussion today.
Well, yeah,
just a little bit of quirkiness mixed in with fun and creepy. Just covered a little bit of everything.
Well, it's a thing that you can take a look at me. I'm no Hollywood actor, and it's a thing of there's a lot of them out there, and then some of them are really good, and some of them kind of aren't all that. But that's not my intention. I'm trying to bring real people's stories. Even though they're fictionalized enough, so people keep their anonymity, that people connect with it, and I've been so lucky that people have come up and told me. Of maybe they experienced some similar hauntings in their location, or maybe people that were to these locations come back and say, I didn't know anyone else had this experience with me. I feel less crazy now, or, yeah, my grand looked at such, yeah, he said it was very much haunted, or I've never heard anybody else mention this. So it connects people, and it starts that discourse that we talked about. If you can't have growth, you can't have the full picture if you don't have everybody talking.
And it's therapeutic.
Absolutely, and very, very cathartic for people who are going through experiences. And like you said, there's closure, but there's also, you take care of that rock, you set it aside, and maybe you walk on up the path. Maybe now you're curious. Maybe now you're in a position where you've been bloodied in battle a little bit, but you're ready for the next step. And that's always fun.
Okay. Hey, Steve, we're getting pretty close to...
Time to say goodnight, Mark.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Steve, for being just fantastic guest. Thank you, Barbara, for producing this. We'll be back Tuesday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern to cover 5G and some of the electrical stuff going on